Hello. So this is going to be a video about how to make Lego blocks. For Lego blocks, of course, since it's a block, we are going to make a cube first. So click on the shelf. I want this block to be flat on the ground plane, so I'm going to move the pivot on the bottom and then move the whole thing up to the grid. So hold down D, or you can also use the insert key, same thing. And then hold down V. V is point snap. So hold down V and then snap the pivot to the bottom or the top, in this case bottom, and then hit insert again to get out of the pivot mode. Our pivot is now perfectly flat on the ground of the cube. And then we hold down X, which is grid snap. Okay, so X is grid snap, and then again move it in Y-axis, and as you can see, it snaps right there to the ground. Lego blocks are in equal, full numbers sizes. So if that block is width 1, then the length would be, for example, 2. Okay, or 3 or 4, full numbers. Right? The height, I just eyeball that because I don't know. So there we have our first Lego block without any detailing. Now for the detailing, we want cylinders for the pins. This is a double block, so basically it would have 8 pins. So we start with a cylinder, and I scale it down. So let's have a look at the top view. I'm holding down space, left click, and then top view. And then I switch to wireframe. So again, I would like to, let me change the background color here so it's a bit easier to see. I would like to snap it into this point here. Now I don't have a grid line because my grid is too big. To change that, right click on the grid icon here and choose the grid options. So currently I have 5 subdivisions. I need 4 times as much. So if it's 10, let me change this to 10 and apply. I'm getting another grid line here, cutting through the existing one, so double. And now I need to double this again because I want a grid line exactly in this quadrant here. So 20. Apply. See, now I have a grid line exactly where I want to snap my cylinder. So close. So let's do that. Hold down X for grid snap, and then just move that cylinder to one of these quadrants. Then scale it down to a size that makes sense. Something like that. Perspective mode, again space, left click, and then you choose the direction. I'm going back to shaded, so I hit 5 on the keyboard, and I just simply move this up until I think it looks right. So again, if you want this to be precise and authentic Lego, then you would need to look up the dimensions. I just eyeball this in this case. Okay, I want this edge here to be round, so I go into edge selection mode. So right click, edge. Then I just have symmetry turned on. I don't actually want that. Turn it off. I double click that edge here, which then will select the whole edge loop. Okay, so you can also skip a few, and with shift double click, and then it selects only the section in between. But if you select one edge with double click, you get an edge loop, the whole edge loop. That's what I want. So I want to bevel this edge. Choose bevel from the menu and dial it in. And if it's too sensitive, so small movements of your mouse do big changes here, click on this pi up here until you have a small pi, and then it's less sensitive. So we want this to be rather sharp, but a little bit beveled. And maybe we want to add some segments here, so it's round. Okay. So that's okay. We're done here. Now I switch back to top view and turn the wireframe on. So I want to duplicate this 7 times, so I have all my pins. So move tool. Then I duplicate this, Control D, and I move this using the X hotkey for grid snap. And just move it over here. Then I select both of these, duplicate, and again X for grid snap and down there. And then you can press Shift D to repeat the last duplication with the same transform. Okay, twice. Now we have all our pins. Switch back to perspective view, shaded. Of course, if you want to be fancy, you can also make a logo, Lego typo on top, which could be part of the model, but let's not go there for now. So I'm selecting all the cylinders from the outliner. It's easier here. And then I combine them into one mesh. Combine. That gives me a new object, but it keeps also the history of that. I don't want that. So I delete the history by having this new object selected and click on delete history. You find that also in the edit menu, delete by type history. So either way, it will delete all these extra objects which we don't need. And these are my pins. Let's call them pins. Let's call this block. Okay, so next thing is we want to bool this. Before I bool this, I'm going to bevel my edges as well on this cube. I don't want to bevel all edges, and as a matter of fact, the bottom ones are going to be sharp. That's from the manufacturing process of Lego blocks, but the top ones are somewhat round, same as on the pins. So I right click edges, and select all the edges on the top, like drawing a line over here. Switch to wireframe to make sure that you haven't selected anything on the bottom by accident. So this is what we want. We apply a bevel. Again, the value is way too high, so fraction needs to be way down. Something like that. And again, we add segments. And here tip, if you have corners like that, do go with equal numbers, even numbers here in the segments, because if you have 3, you end up getting a triangle. Okay, so 2 is fine, 3 is not, 4 is fine, 5 is not. Okay, so in this case I go with 4. And I think the radius is a bit too big. Just comparing here with the pin. Okay, that looks good. Shaded. You see the difference that it makes. You get this highlight here on the edges, which makes it much easier to read in opposition to the bottom, where you have no highlight here. which is fine later on, but for the top it will be a bit too CG. Okay, so next thing is we bool these objects with that cube. So I select that cube, shift select the pins, mesh boolean union. So union is basically combining them into one mesh. Let me switch to wireframe for the time being so you see the difference. Mesh combine boolean. See, the bottom part, which is now pink, is still displayed because of this history thing in Maya. The bottom part is gone. Okay, and then we delete the history. Again, we get a new object here with a standard name. So delete the history by clicking on this button on the poly modeling shelf. That removes all the objects, and we are left with one single object, the block. Okay, next thing is we need to bool out the bottom part because this is to be hollow. So we need another cube, and this cube can stick out a little, okay, on the bottom. Doesn't matter. So what matters though is the width of this. We want a wall thickness here. So I'm looking from the bottom, wireframe, and first I scale this down. So this difference here is the wall thickness of our Lego block. So I'm eyeballing this a bit, and then we do the length, and we want the same wall thickness on the top and the bottom. Something like here, the same thickness. Okay. Then we look from the front and move it down so we have the same wall thickness here on the top as well. So a little bit down. And then the same thing, we bool. First we select our main object, shift select our cutter, and I'm switching to shaded. Mesh boolean difference, A minus B. Okay, so if you have selected it the other way around, the cutter first and then the block, the main object, then you would choose difference B minus A. But in this case, it's the outer block minus the inner block. There you have it. Again, we delete the history. Next thing is having these tubes inside, which are basically the clamps that are sitting here in the middle between the pins. That's exactly how the blocks work. There is an object type in the create menu which you don't find on the shelf because it's more rarely used. So it's like the pipe here. You see there's a bunch of primitives that are not on the poly modeling shelf because they're hardly being used. But in this case, this is exactly what we need, a pipe. I'm switching to bottom view. First I scale this thing down. Maybe switch to wireframe. So for the outer size, basically this needs to be snug to the pins. Okay, that's basically how they connect the Lego blocks with each other, but not as thick. It's much thinner. For that we go into the primitive settings. Let's get this a bit smaller there. It's the thickness, 0.5. So you can change that to something more reasonable, because this thing is actually slightly bit bigger, to be honest. I mean, it's not really that matters, but basically there is a bit of an overlap, tiny overlap, because when these Lego blocks are being put together, this pipe is deforming, and through the deforming process it clamps onto these pins. That's just from the technical side. not that it really matters. Front view. I want this to be flush with the bottom. So easiest way again is to move the pivot. So I'm holding down D to get to pivot mode and V at the same time, and then I move it down until it snaps to the bottom. Then I go to my move tool, hold down V again for point snap, and I go in the Y direction and snap to one of these points here. Okay, so now it's perfectly flush. Then I'm scaling it up until it touches the wall, because we're going to bool it in there with union. So I'm going to the bottom view and I'm turning on grid. We need 2 copies of that. One sits here, one sits here, and one sits here. So 3 overall. So Control D for duplicating it. Then X for grid snap. And here's our first one. Then Control D to make another duplicate. X and down there. Shaded. I'm going to select all 3 and combine them into one. Again, history is still maintained, so let's delete that. We don't need that. And then I remember the longer blocks also have like these in between stabilizers, I call them. So let's make them first. I'm switching to bottom view again, wireframe. And again, I'm going to just make a block. The thickness of this block is, oops, it's going very fast, is about the same as the thickness of these tubes or pipes. And I'm scaling it down until it has the length between here and here. So this is just eyeballing for now. So I'm going to place it here and have them a little overlap here and here with the wall thickness, okay? And then I duplicate that and move that duplicate over here. Again, have them overlap. Maybe I should have changed the length first. Okay, I delete my duplicate. I just realized it's way too long, of course. So let's fix that first. Same thing, I need a pivot on the bottom, so D and V, and then I snap it down there. Then V for point snap again and up there. So it's flush with the box, and then I just scale it down until it has the same length as, so it touches the wall, the inner wall of that block. And now we can duplicate this. Best done in the bottom view, just to make sure that it's placed correctly. Shaded. So I'm going to combine that with these 3 tubes here. So that tube plus shift that box and shift that box, and then I combine this. Combine. Or maybe we do a bool in this case, bool union. Delete history, and then shift this, so select that one, the outer block, shift select that new one, and do also a Boolean union. And delete history. And that's the Lego block. Or break. On the underscore, we don't like spaces. Now for presentation, I'm assigning a new material. Sorry, I just realized that was outside of the camera. New material, new material. Choose an Arnold shader, AI standard surface. Give it a nice color. Let's say some sort of palish turquoise. It's a bit too, something like that. And then duplicate this, Control D, move it up. So you can use the pivot, since it's on the bottom, and snap it to one of these points here on the top. As you can see, then it's perfectly flush. I'm going to move it over. Again, use the snap to one of these points here. Using V, and then you should be able to get it perfectly flush. Okay, and then right click, new material. Again, we apply a Arnold shader. Where is it? The AI standard surface. And we choose a different color. Let's say a red, but not quite as red. More like a orangey red. Something like that. Duplicate again. Use the V for point snap, just to get it there. Maybe we rotate it by 90 degrees, so hold down J for snapping or angle snap, like so. And then again, assign a new shader, new material, new material, Arnold AI standard surface. This one we make yellow, but not that kind of yellow, more like an orangey, pale, not so saturated, a bit darker, maybe a little bit more orangey. And actually this one here I don't like. Let's make this into something more reddish, so a little bit more to the red color. Yeah, that's better. And there you have it. Now, to have them together, we can just simply put one on top of the other via parenting. So we could middle mouse drag, so that will be the scroll wheel click, and drag it in the outliner to the brick under below. So we have like this hierarchy here. So if I select that brick, the other one will come along. Okay. Now we do the same thing for that brick and make it a child of brick 1. Brick 2, middle mouse drag to brick 1. Okay, so we're creating this kind of hierarchy. That means when I move this parent, everything comes along. For presentation, I make sure my timeline goes from 1 to, let's say, 120. Adjust the slider here. Then I go to frame 1 with my time slider here. and I put a keyframe down in rotate Y. Key selected. Then I go to my last frame and type in a 360. So one full turn. And again, right click, key selected. And there you have your Lego block presentation. I'm just thinking, actually it would be good to have one Lego block sitting like a fallen off toy next to it, the other way around. So I'm duplicating this. And this one I'm just turning upside down. Maybe leaning against the other one. So something like that. Let's see. A bit more flat. So if you want this to be more precise, you might want to put the pivot temporarily on one of these corners here. I think actually this one here would be good, since it's a bit lower. So I'm holding down D, and then I'm pressing V to snap it. First I snap it to that point, and then I snap it to that point. So it's perfectly on that corner there. Then I snap it to the grid in Y, so it touches the ground, and now I can just rotate it until it touches that brick, so it leans against it. So you might want to go out a bit, so you have a bit more of a leverage. Okay, and of course we don't want this to penetrate, so let's move this to the side. Can be like so. Okay, that's good enough. Since it's already a child, it will come along with the rotation. So let's frame that nicely, something like that. Unselected, we don't want to see the wireframe. And maybe we need to, yeah, we have ease in, ease out. So we want this to be a linear motion. So my keyframes down here are ease in and ease out. So select the top Lego brick here, which is the parent of everything. That one has the animation. Right click that keyframe here. And the problem here, it's not inside of the recording. So in that menu, find the tangents menu and then choose linear there. The same for that keyframe. Tangents menu and then linear. And that gives you a linear motion. Okay, unselect. Now, to Play Blast, there's two ways to do this. Either you click on the timeline, right click, and choose Play Blast option box here. Again, it's not in the camera. Or you can go to the Windows menu and choose Play Blast here, option box. That gives you this dialog. Here, so my dialog looks a bit different because of a different version of Maya. Don't worry about it. The options that are not available to you, just simply ignore them. The options that are available to you and which are important is the format, QT. If you don't have QT in here, then you need to install the codec. So the Neo lessons have that codec for download in the very bottom of the Neo lesson. Encoding, choose to H264. So it's not alphabetically, as you can see the list. You would expect it to be somewhere here where H261 and 263 are, but it is not. It's further up in the list, so you need to scroll. Okay, H264. Quality 60 is perfectly fine. Display size, choose custom. Do not choose from window or render settings. Render settings would be okay, but then you have to go into the render settings and change it there. So easiest is custom, and then type in a number here. And the number here for that resolution has to be even numbered. Okay, so 1024 is an even number. 768 is also an even number. If one of these numbers is not even, your video will not upload to Neo. Okay, so keep that in mind. So choose these numbers 1024 and 768, which is a standard resolution. Scale has to be 1. Frame padding 4 doesn't matter really, but in this just leave it on 4. Remove temporary files is just for cleaning up after you made a Blade Blast. You don't want any garbage lying around on your machine. And save to file is important, otherwise it will not save the file. Then movie file. Default is Blade Blast. That you don't know where it's saving it, so just click on Browse, get this file browser here, and then choose a location. I choose desktop and call it Lego, and then enter. Okay, that's it, as you can see, and then just click on Blade Blast. That will quickly make a movie, and it opened up a very large video player, and there you have it. And this is the video that you upload. Okay, that's it for now.